Saint Thomas Aquinas, Italian Christian theologian and philosopher. One of the most important philosophers of medieval scholasticism, Saint Thomas Aquinas combined the theological foundations of faith with the philosophical principles of reason. Aquinas, a leading figure in the Roman Catholic Church and a prolific author, passed away on March 7, 1274, in the Fossa Nova Cistercian monastery in Latium, Papal States, Italy, close to Terracina. Early life. Saint Thomas Aquinas was born around 1225 in Roccasca, Italy, close to Aquino, Terra di Lavoro, in the Kingdom of Sicily. He was the son of Landulf, Count of Aquino. Thomas was the youngest of 8 children and had 8 siblings. Theodora, his mother, was Countess of Tino. Despite being related to the emperors Frederick I and Henry VI, Thomas' family was seen as being of lower nobility. Prior to the birth of Saint Thomas Aquinas, a holy hermit told his mother a prophecy that her son would join the order of friars preachers, grow to be a great learner, and achieve unmatched sanctity. Saint Thomas Aquinas was sent to the Abbey of Monte Cassino when he was just 5 years old to train with Benedictine monks, as was customary at the time. Saint Thomas Aquinas is referred to in Wisdom 8:19 as a smart child who had received a fine soul. The inquisitive small child at Monte Cassino constantly asked his patrons, "What is God?" When Saint Thomas Aquinas was 13 years old, the political circumstances compelled him to return to Naples. Prior to that, he had remained at the monastery. Education. At a Naples Benedictine house, Saint Thomas Aquinas spent the following 5 years finishing his primary education. He studied Aristotle's writings during those years, which would later serve as a crucial springboard for Saint Thomas Aquinas' own philosophical investigation. Thomas also became interested in more modern monastic orders in the Benedictine house, which was connected to the University of Naples. In contrast to the more conventional beliefs and segregated lifestyle he had witnessed in the Abbey of Monte Cassino, he was especially drawn to those that stressed a life of spiritual service. Saint Thomas Aquinas enrolled at the University of Naples around the year 1239. He secretly entered a Dominican monastic order in 1243, and in 1244 he received the habit. When his family learned, they felt so betrayed that he had abandoned the ideals to which they were committed that they made the decision to abduct him. Thomas was held captive by his family in the San Giovanni Castle at Rocca Secca for a full year. They made an effort to rid Thomas of his new views during this period. However, Thomas clung to the principles he had taught at school, and rejoined the Dominican order after being freed in 1245. Saint Thomas Aquinas resumed his studies with the Dominicans in Naples, Paris, and Cologne from 1245 to 1252. In 1250, he received his ordination in Cologne, Germany, and thereafter began to instruct in theology at the University of Paris. Later, Saint Thomas Aquinas received his PhD in theology from Saint Albert the Great. Thomas proved to be an exceptional student, which was in line with the holy hermit's prediction, yet paradoxically, his modesty occasionally led his classmates to mistake him for being stupid. Saint Albert the Great, Thomas' professor, who had read his brilliant thesis, said in support of him, "We call this young man a dumb ox, yet his roaring in doctrine will one day resound throughout the world." Theology and philosophy. Saint Thomas Aquinas dedicated his life to traveling, writing, teaching, public speaking, and preaching after completing his schooling. Universities and religious organizations alike aspired to get insight from the Christian apostle. The conflict over how to reconcile the relationship between philosophy and theology was at the forefront of medieval thought. People couldn't agree on how to connect the knowledge they learned through revelation with the knowledge they learned from inadvertent observation utilizing their minds and senses. The two types of knowledge were diametrically opposed, according to Averro's thesis of the double truth, asserting that both kinds of knowledge ultimately derive from God and are thus compatible. Saint Thomas Aquinas' revolutionary views challenged Averro's notion. Thomas's philosophy held that they could not only coexist, but also cooperate. He thought that reason could clarify and demystify faith, while revelation could lead reason and keep it from erring. Further discussion of faith and reason's responsibilities in understanding and demonstrating the existence of God is found in Saint Thomas Aquinas' writings. Saint Thomas Aquinas thought that there were 5 ways to demonstrate the existence of God, principally by 1. Observing movement in the world as evidence of God, the immovable mover. 2. Observing cause and effect and identifying God as the cause of everything, 3. Coming to the conclusion that the impermanence of beings proves the existence of a necessary being, God, who originates only from within himself. And 4. Observing varying levels of human perfection and concluding that after defending people's inborn capacity to recognize evidence of God, Thomas turned his attention to the issue of preserving God's reputation as an all-powerful entity. Another distinctive topic addressed by St. Thomas Aquinas was proper conduct in front of God. By doing this, he gave his concepts a modern, some could even argue timeless, everyday context. Thomas thought that the state's rules were actually a byproduct of human nature and were essential to ensuring social well-being. He claimed that people could gain eternal salvation of their souls in the hereafter by abiding by the social regulations of the state. 3 categories of rules were described by St. Thomas Aquinas: natural, constructive, and eternal. According to his treatise, positive law is the rule of the state or government and should always be a manifestation of natural law. Eternal law, in the case of rational beings, depends on reason and is carried out through free will, which also works toward the accomplishment of man's spiritual goals. Natural law prompts man to act in accordance with achieving his goals and governs man's sense of right and wrong. St. Thomas Aquinas' treatises address the issues and problems of medieval intellectuals, church leaders, and common people equally by fusing ancient theological concepts with contemporary philosophic thought. They may have been unmatched in philosophical significance at the period for this same reason, which also explains why they would continue to shape modern thought going forward, drawing replies from theologians, philosophers, critics, and believers. Later life and death. St. Thomas Aquinas consented in June 1272 to travel to Naples and launch a theological studies program for the Dominican house close to the university. Even while he continued to write frequently, the caliber of his work started to decline. St. Thomas Aquinas saw a mystical vision on the feast of St. Nicholas in 1273 that made writing appear insignificant to him. At Mass, he allegedly heard a voice saying, "Thou hast written well of me, Thomas, what reward wilt thou have?" From a crucifix. Thomas Aquinas, a Christian philosopher, responded, "None other than thyself, Lord." Father Reginald of Piperno, the confessor of St. Thomas Aquinas, urged him to continue writing, and he responded, "I'm at my limit. I've been given access to so many secrets that everything I've written now seems incredibly useless." Thomas Aquinas ceased all further writing. St. Thomas Aquinas set off on foot in January 1274 for Lyon, France, to take part in the Second Council, but he never arrived. He became ill at the Italian Cistercian Abbey of Fossanova while traveling. The monks wanted St. Thomas Aquinas to stay at the castle, but Thomas opted to stay at the monastery because he knew his time was running out, and that it would be preferable for him to be found there if the Lord wished to take him away. St. Thomas Aquinas, often known as the Universal Teacher, passed away on March 7, 1274, at the monastery of Fossanova. In 1323, Pope John XXII canonized him.